I'm Taylor Hannah. Welcome to Western Perspective. After what seems like months of campaigning and bickering between the parties, election day has come and gone. While the remainder of the votes are being counted and most of the election drama is finally over, are you surprised with the results? Political expert Dr. Ian Cook joins us for an election analysis and explains what it will mean for you over the next 3 years.
Well, it was a surprise election result last night when the Morrison government looks like they're going to be returned for another 3 years. Most of us were predicting a Labor win, and it turns out we were wrong. The question we've got to ask ourselves is, why was that? For many of us, we were following the polls, and for 3 years we've been watching polls that suggested a Labor government would be formed. Those polls didn't turn out to be quite as accurate as we'd hoped or thought they might be. So the question we're trying to answer now is what happened with the polls. For many years they've been suggesting a Labor win. It didn't happen. One possibility is that people changed their mind late in the piece. We certainly saw a minor shift toward the Liberal Party in the last week or so of the election. Perhaps it went further. One probability or one possibility is that we overestimated the sort of preference flows that would go here. And certainly it's shown that the populist parties, One Nation and the United Australia Party, their preference flowed very tightly to the Liberal Party, which is quite unusual for their voters. And I fully understand why pollsters might have assumed that a lot more of those votes would have gone to Labor than in fact went to Labor. Another explanation is landlines. Fewer people using landlines means we're perhaps getting the wrong sorts of samples, or at least not accurate enough samples. And finally, the possibility is people are just not telling the truth to pollsters. They don't want to be looked down on for giving the wrong answer, so they're not giving them the correct answer. So what's next for the Morrison government? I think one of the first challenges that Scott Morrison will face would be putting together a front bench. He certainly lost some important senior Liberals, Julie Bishop and Tony Abbott, being two noteworthy examples. So in the first instance, it's a question of what sort of ministry we're going to see. The other question is about the budget. Certainly we saw that as an election-winning budget, and indeed it was an election-winning budget. Now the question will be, can they deliver on it, especially with a slim majority in the lower house and no majority at all in the upper house? So the big question for this evening is, what happened to the Labor Party? The win we were all expecting didn't materialise. One explanation is Bill Shorten. He wasn't a particularly popular leader. Scott Morrison ran very much a leader-on-leader campaign and proved that he was the much more popular Prime Minister and popular person. Perhaps Bob Hawke's death reminded us of the fact that Bill Shorten was not Bob Hawke. Another possibility is the policies the Labor Party were developing were too many, too big and too costly, and set themselves up for a scare campaign which proved to be wholly successful. The final effect was in terms of the rise of populist parties like One Nation, well perhaps not so much risen for One Nation, but the United Australia Party. They were quite effective in taking votes away from Labor. Labor's first preferences fell, and for those votes to continue on to the Liberal Party. So there was a big effect, I think, coming out of One Nation and the United Australia Party. The next question to the Labor Party is, who's going to take them forward? After what has to have been a devastating loss, there's going to be a lot of soul-searching, scratching of heads and wondering just what happened and what we do now. I think most eyes are going to Tanya Plibersek and Anthony Albanese, and I expect them to be the two contestants for the leadership. Both have been around quite a long time, got a lot of experience, generally well regarded by the Australian people. So at this stage, they're certainly the names that I'd be looking at as the next Labor leader. What does this mean for young people? I think that's one of the important takeaways from this election, given the sorts of policies it won and the sorts of voters who seem to have influenced the outcome. Some of the key policies included negative gearing and franking credits. These are sorts of policies that definitely affect older Australians and don't affect so many younger Australians, unless it's to keep them out of the housing market. Who voted for the Liberal Party? For the most part, their support tends to come from an older demographic. The Liberal Party generally resistant toward climate change policy and addressing climate change. So this is a party that may well work hard in the interests of older Australians and not so much in the interests of younger Australians. It's important for younger Australians to pay attention to this government, to watch its government and to put pressure on this government to recognise the interests of young people. This is Ian Cook for WAMN News.
Next week on WP, we will discuss the issues around WA's rising power prices. Until then, Ivan and Danny, back to you.
Thank you, Taylor. This week's main news again. It's been dubbed as a miracle for Scott Morrison as the coalition managed to secure more seats than the Labour opposition in spite of the rise in independent candidates. Although the ruling LNP managed to secure a slim majority, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott has lost his seat.
And that's our news for this week. We have the latest news on our website and Facebook page.
Until next Sunday after 8, good evening.
Good night.